Jhon Duran, the man, the myth, the guy who does a West Ham Irons cross while still at Aston Villa. He's looked like one of the best strikers in the Premier League this season, but he hasn't even started a game yet in the league. He scored 4 goals off 11 shots, and by far he has the best minutes to goal ratio out of all the strikers in the Premier League. So in a story as old as time, when does the super sub turn into the star striker? So in this video we look at the Jhon Duran paradox. He didn't come out of nowhere, he came from Chicago Fire in 2022. Aston Villa paid about £18 million including add-ons for him. Atletico Madrid and other big clubs were after him at the time, so from what I've heard, Aston Villa were very happy that they were able to get his signature. He's a big target man, and in my opinion he seemed quite erratic at the club at the start. He seemed like he had a lot of ability. I remember him doing some outrageous goals in his first 2 years, but you can tell he's become a bit more polished. He's still very raw. I think it's not for debate, he's been one of the most exciting players in the Premier League this season. But why hasn't he started any games? I mean, obviously Ollie Watkins, who was maybe one of the best strikers in Europe last season, is starting in front of him. And despite a slow start, Ollie Watkins is coming into his own this season again. He looks similar to his last season's form. So there's one of the things that's pushing Jhon Duran on the bench. And he's been playing some Champions League games. Obviously he scored against Bayern Munich to win at Villa Park. But it is the age-old question, well, if he's that good, why is he not starting? Because just from a simple basic terms, if you give a better player more minutes, they'll have more time to play better. And obviously that's not how things go in the Premier League and in football, as we're going to discuss in this video. Because if you're looking at pure stats, he's got 4 goals in 10 games, all substitute appearances, I believe no more than 30 minutes each game. I mean, at one point I think he had a ridiculous 40% shot to goal conversion rate, which it's not sustainable, is it? I mean, even Erling Haaland is about at a 25%. But is this the right move for Duran to keep him on the bench? I mean, he personally is not going to want to stay on the bench. He looks like a very abrasive, confident character, and I can't see him wanting to stay at Aston Villa for a long time if Ollie Watkins is always starting over him. Unfortunately with Villa, I think it's tough because they don't play a system that allows 2 strikers up front. They tried that with Danny Ings and Ollie Watkins, and it just did not work well. Aston Villa pushed on when they just had Ollie Watkins up front with Diaby or Bailey. And you can argue these things could work. I mean, maybe look at Liverpool. Liverpool have 3 strikers, Gakpo, Nunes and Jota. They're trying to fit them in around the team, and it seems like it's working so far. But obviously the inevitable, well, I think I'm better than him, I think I should earn more money than him, it's always going to come, and I can't see it working well for Aston Villa in the long run. But like I say, should super subs exist, or are they just not good enough to play? The best super subs ever are Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Xavi Hernandez, Chicharito, David Trezeguet maybe for a brief period of time, and then the Lord and Saviour, Divock Origi, one of the most iconic super subs we've seen. And let's take a look at Solskjaer. I watched the overlap episode when Solskjaer was talking about Man United and Ferguson. I don't know if they've done many of those episodes. He was going that Ferguson told him he was going to get benched, and it seemed to spur him on in that moment, which I suppose will do for a lot of players. Solskjaer was one of those that he seems ready every time he used to come on the pitch. There are some players that you're watching a game and they don't come out of the gates. They need that half an hour to feel themselves around the game. I personally always thought Mo Salah was that kind of person. Mo Salah, I always think in a second half he's normally better. I rarely see Mo Salah just come out and be brilliant in the first half, and therefore I don't think he'd make a great super sub. On the flip side of that, if you look at someone like a Divock Origi was pushed into a starting position at some points during his time at Liverpool, you know, when Bobby Firmino was injured, and I don't think he performed really well. I think he always used to maybe shy away from it a bit, and he looked like someone who was a lot better off the bench. Maybe that's because he needed the defenders to be more tired, because let's face it, a lot of these super subs are dynamic, energetic players. Chicharito, Javier Hernandez, he was brilliant at Man United, even a bit of Real Madrid, West Ham. He was great coming off the bench because he was so quick, he was so dynamic. When all these centre-backs had 60, 70 minutes of Rooney, of Nani, of Antonio Valencia just pounding these defences, then you had Hernandez come on at 70 minutes, and it was just another player that is going to make them even more tired. Jhon Duran seems like one of those type of players. He's a very big lad, he's very athletic, and he seems very aggressive. And I think this works in his favour because despite I think a lot of centre-backs preferring the physical battles than the players like Sergio Aguero who will just dribble past them, it's still tough when you've played 60, 70 minutes against Ollie Watkins, who is going to run you ragged, and then you've you've got this massive Colombian lad on who's just going to barge into you, tread on your toes. And I think one of the best things about Durán, he just shoots at a moment's notice. And you could argue this is a bad thing about him because someone like a Darwin Núñez, I think, does this sometimes, and his shots just go everywhere, and it's quite erratic. But with Durán, as we saw with the Everton goal a couple of months ago, it was an insane finish, and it took everyone by surprise, because who would have thought he was going to shoot from 35 yards out? There was no one closing him down because no one expected it. But I think with Durán, that works in his favour, because there are players who are off the toes, the players who aren't expecting what he's going to do, and therefore that's why he scored 5, 6, 7 goals this season for Aston Villa. It's interesting because I like to compare this to the NBA, and I'm sorry if you're not a big basketball fan, but it's the best comparison because they have a 6-man of the year award where they're 6-man, you know, the 5 starters, and then the first sub that comes on, there's literally an award for them every single year. I mean, imagine if we had a super sub award in the Premier League. But some teams will still play these 6 men as long as the starters, but they'll come on against the second unit of the other team. Some of you guys might not know these names, but Manu Ginobili from San Antonio Spurs, Jamal Crawford he played for so many teams. These lads were good enough to start in any other team in the league. Their coaches will put them on the sideline, and then in 10 minutes time they'd put them on the court, and they'd be brilliant because all the other players weren't ready for them because they were as good as all the other starters. Is Unai Emery doing this, or is he just trying to find his feet at the moment? Because obviously you want to start all your best players possible. With basketball, it's slightly different because it's got rolling subs, because eventually you can have the 6-man starting with all the other best players. My thing for Villa would be that it's working at the moment. I know they're having a few up and down results in the Premier League, but I mean, they've won against Bayern Munich, they won against Bologna the other night, so there's no reason to change it. I just think having Ollie Watkins tire out his defenders by running, and then have Jhon Duran come on in the 65th minute, 70th minute to break up the game, I think that is a perfect combination. The only issue with that is when Ollie Watkins starts going, well, boss, I was playing 80, 90 minutes every single game last season, and now I'm playing 65, 70 minutes. It seems like it's always going to bring up new challenges. I personally think in knockout tournaments, it works better than the league. I think in knockout tournaments, look at Gareth Bale, for example, for Real Madrid. One of the best wingers I've ever seen. Because of his issues at Real Madrid, because of his injuries, he was getting brought off the bench quite a bit. And 2 Champions League finals, he came off the bench and changed the game and scored the goals to win it, basically. Liverpool, I was in the crowd that game, and he scored those 2 goals to win the game. Atletico Madrid, he came on with the header to, I believe it was to get them into extra time. Would he have done this if he was on the pitch from the start? Potentially, but also in that Liverpool game, the players were tired, Mo Salah had come off, and you needed that world-class talent to come off the bench and take over from a Cristiano Ronaldo who wasn't having the great game, and just take the players off by guard. I think in the league it causes more and more issues because, for one, the gratitude isn't straight away. Gareth Bale in those finals was the hero, he's the man of the match, and therefore it washes over him that he didn't play 60, 70 minutes in those games. Whereas if Jhon Duran keeps on scoring these goals and winning the games, maybe making it 3-4-1, you're not really going to feel the buzz of it until you make the Champions League again, until you're challenging for the Premier League. It'll always feel like I could be doing more in the game, and if I was there, I could score a hat-trick in this game. I mean, if I scored 2 goals in 10 minutes and I could score 4 goals in 20 minutes, it's this whole thing that every player will go across the mind. It is this whole paradox of when do you start a super sub or do you start a super sub? Because at the end of the day, we could put this argument towards an Erling Haaland, let Man City blast teams for 70 minutes, then bring Erling Haaland on for the last 25 minutes and he might score a hat-trick. That's never going to happen because Haaland should start every single minute possible. But I do think there are some players who struggle from the start and need that buzz of coming on. Jhon Duran, I watched him a few times in the Champions League. I believe he started against young boys. I think he looked a bit less impactful than he did when he comes off the bench. And this is a whole thing. From all the stuff I've read about him, he seems a very confident character. Maybe coming on at the 70th minute, all the crowd stands up clapping you to come on. They're so buzzing. That is going to just energise you, isn't it? Whereas at the start of a game, some players, their concentration might not be good enough, or the fact that they might be chasing a game for a bit. It's all of these factors that I think make a player a super sub or a superstar. And I personally think Jhon Duran is going to be maybe both in his career. He might not ever get to the superstar level, but I think he'll be a 15 to 20 goal Premier League striker. He seems like he's got that attitude about him. He seems like he's got that ability about him. I think there are times where an iconic super sub gets a move or gets more game time, and they do flourish. I mean, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, I believe, in the 01-02 season, got 17 goals and he had less substitute appearances. It's not a bad return. Obviously David Trezeguet had a great career at Juventus, he won a lot with France. Even Olivier Giroud, when he came more into his own at Chelsea and even AC Milan, it seemed like he was flourishing a lot more. But then you go to a player like Divock Origi, he moves to AC Milan and he just didn't really have a great career there. He even tried to get a move back to Nottingham Forest, and again he was coming off the bench for Chris Wood and he just couldn't really make it work. Likewise with maybe Javier Hernandez. I think at West Ham, I know he came off the bench a bit at Real Madrid, I just don't think it really worked for him, whereas at Man United, Ferguson knew exactly how to motivate him coming off that bench. But let me know what you think. Let me know if you think Jhon Duran should be starting. He's not better than Ollie Watkins, I think we can all agree that, but he can definitely get into some teams, and you never know, he might get his move to West Ham that he wanted in the summer. If you could leave a like on the video, if you can comment, tell me what you think, and like I say, if you could subscribe, that'd be brilliant. But thanks for watching.